Welcome to Pineland Underground, the official podcast of the United States Army's John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Center and School, and the best podcast the military has to offer.
Real, bold, and unrestricted.
We're your hosts, Sergeant Major Chuck Ritter,
Major Bobby Tuttle. Welcome to Pineland Underground. Hey, welcome back to Pineland Underground. We're recording here from the John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Center and School campus here at the PAO studio. Chuck, how's everything going today?
Awesome, Bobby. I just want to let you know, though, I sound like this because I've been method acting today. In my mind, I've been visualizing that I'm an officer that just came back from ILE, coming back to a unit as a field grade. So obviously in my mind, I'm just better than you are. I know more. I've been walking around all day long making people salute me.
More importantly, what is method acting?
Method acting is where I just stay and roll all day long. So I just walk around all day, like, super pompous.
So you're LARPing, right? Live action role play.
Basically LARPing.
Okay.
Yep.
You're a graduate of ILE, so you feel very confident coming back now that you're ILE graduated. You're probably a field grade officer.
You're now a field grade. People must respect you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's how it is. So I just want to know what it felt like. I see officers do it all the time. So I was like, man, I wonder what that feels like, just to feel, that great about yourself.
Could be a little bit of like refreshment. They just came back from a school, ILE, where they got to focus on selves, families, rehabilitation.
For like a year, right? Yeah. I wouldn't know that as an NCO because, our equivalent's like 6 weeks. It's great. While you guys are out in California surfing, living a very...
Well, that's just one ILE venue.
That is one.
I'm a little biased too.
Most of them generally give you some time to rest and recover.
Yeah, you do hit that mid-career mark. ILE typically happens around the 10-year mark of what will become a 20-year Army career. Mm-hmm. And you pin on field grade officer or major or 04. That is your opportunity to come back, re-blue to what a brigade or battalion, how they fight, become a member of a staff, and continue to broaden yourself on how to work jointly in the joint interagency, intergovernmental realm.
That was a very officer explanation. I appreciate that, Bobby.
Yeah.
But that does go into some topics that I want to cover today. And for today's podcast, our guests are ourselves. Not that we didn't have anybody that we couldn't interview, but there were some topics that we've been discussing lately that I felt like I just wanted to have a conversation between the two of us about. So I know you have some things that you want to talk about. I want to talk about some professional military education and rank entitlement topics.
Yes.
But why don't you kick off with one of your topics you want to discuss?
Yeah, so on the podcast for Pineland Underground, we've had a lot of amazing discussions over the past 6 months, centered on special forces, psychological operations, civil affairs operations, and how those all work together. But a common theme and thread we've pulled on, a prime example is Hibbett City Gear, with members who've transitioned out of the military and are crushing it in the civilian sector and out in industry. Kyle Lamb, Lamb. A lot of the folks we've had on here, a lot of our guests, we've talked leadership, right? So I think we've discussed leadership pretty in depth. I think that it would be appropriate for the two of us to talk about teams or being a teammate and how you approach as a special operations person being a member of a team. So we have our ODAs.
And that's an operational detachment alpha if you're not within special operations, which is the smallest member of a special forces element.
Yep, typically call it a detachment or a team.
Just or like an A-team, just like in the show.
A-team.
Yeah.
What goes into a team? Across civil affairs, PSYOP, and special forces, everybody has a team or a detachment. And that team, everybody on that team, typically comprised of everyone's a leader, but typically comprised of a commander who is responsible for what that team does and fails to do, an operations individual, someone who runs the team for training, operations, and task management, and then specific functions of the team where it all worked together and synchronized. You put that team towards a problem set or a mission, and that's how the team can accomplish that mission. But you've been a member of a team before. You were a team sergeant or a operations sergeant from a Special Forces ODA, and then you've been a teammate, across staffs or across battalions, different levels. Just kind of opening thoughts. How do you prepare to become a member of a team when you're not necessarily the leader of that team?
Yeah, so the secret to that is really the secret to leadership, right? You got to show up and you have to be invested and you have to care with a little bit of humility, right? And a lot of people will show up to a team, and you hear it oftentimes in courses here where you'll hear officers in the Captain's Career Course or places, people will say things like, hey, I'm just doing this part here, or I'm doing the piece where I graduate to use as a stepping stone to my next job, right? as if what they're about to get into isn't important. But that's an automatic indicator to everybody around you that, okay, you're not going to really care about what you're about to do. And if you ever find yourself stepping into a team environment, saying those things like, hey guys, I'm here, but I'm using this as a stepping stone to make it up here. You're virtue signaling to everybody around you that you really just don't care about what you're about to get yourself into, which equates, in my mind, to not being a good teammate and a good team member. Because really, the only secret to leadership is that you have to care about your mission. You don't have to like your mission. You have to love it, but you have to care about it. Mm-hmm. Same thing, you have to care about your organization. You have to love it sometimes, but you have to care about it. Same thing with the personnel under you. You have to care about them. I don't have to necessarily like you if you're my teammate or if you fall under me as a leader, but I have to care about you, right?
Oh, absolutely.
But when you show up to a team, you should care about those things too. Like, what is the organization that I'm about to be a part of? I have to care about that and be invested. I have to care about the people on my left and right, and I have to care about whatever the mission is. Yeah, I don't have to like the mission. Sometimes we don't like what we're doing. We don't like the rules. But like we always say, the rules don't care about your opinion, right? It's a volunteer job. You signed up to do this. Sometimes when you join the Army, you do things that you don't necessarily want to do. It comes with you volunteering for that. So I don't know. What do you think about that?
No, I completely agree with you. I think that the way to approach coming to being a member of a team, right, is you have to understand like what comprised the team. There's different functions. You look at a Special Forces Detachment, you have different MOSs or occupational specialties, really just specialties and functions of that staff.
So you're cross-functional by nature, right? There's no need to add that, like, we're a cross-functional team. You're already...
It's inherently cross-functional.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Because there's lots of functions that everybody has, but when synchronized together, when they work together, it's just like a staff, just like a sports team. You have special teams, you have offense, you have defense, but everyone's part of that same team. So I'm actually about to transition and leave the current position that I'm in, the Commander's Initiatives Group here, and be a member of a different team. And so the first steps I'm going to take are to understand who all is on that team. You know, how many people, what are their roles, responsibilities, what is it they do, really their functions. I kind of know my own personal strengths, my personal weaknesses, things I gravitate towards and interests, but also I want to see where I can best fit in to help out the team completely. And so I think a couple of aspects that are important to be a member of that team. Again, everybody brings different skills, different backgrounds to the table, but you can't only do your one thing, right? If you're a one-trick pony and it's your one thing to be like the weapons sergeant on your detachment or your team, or the one thing to be like the blocker on the team, you can't just do that one thing very, very well. You should do it extremely well and continue to train on that specific function that belongs to you. However, you have to understand and be able to do the job of the person to the left and right of you as well, and then provide a little bit of mentorship or guidance or just feedback to their specific position and how they can work together. I think that's extremely important. Any examples from your kind of time growing up you're an 18 Bravo, right?
Mm-hmm.
Any examples when you were stepping into that first team room as a young 18 Bravo, you had a senior 18 Bravo on your team, and you kind of had to figure out how you fit into that?
Whenever you step into a new team role, whether you're a major or you're that young E6 or you're young E5, I think the principles are all exactly the same. You have to come in. It doesn't matter what your reputation was beforehand. You could have been the ultimate badass, right? But the reality is, anytime you step into a new role, you can't confuse that with the fact that to be competent to wherever you're going, especially for somebody like you, you're going to a totally new job that you've never done before, right?
Yep, completely.
So you have to learn what you're doing. So there's not going to be competence there. And right away, there's not going to be trust because people don't care what you did beforehand. They're going to care about what are you doing in this position? What are you bringing to the table?
What can you do for me right now?
What are you bringing to the table today, right? Anytime you step into a new role, whether it's, and now I'm going from an E6 to an E7 on a team, which I should assume more responsibility, or I'm going to step into a new leadership position, you got to come in with that humility to understand that nobody really cares what you did yesterday. And the fact is, you're getting yourself into something that you got to learn. So I think anytime you come into a new team, when I walked into my first detachment, I probably had the wrong, outlook. I was that guy that graduated the Q course and said, okay, I've arrived, I've made it, I should be treated as an equal. That's not the way to do it, right? And, there was some friction there probably for the first month. I remember me and my senior Bravo, a guy named Al Passmore, we're great friends to this day. He's a warrant officer, guy's a beast. He got shot through both legs with a machine gun, ended up recovering from it. We hated each other for a while. And it was mainly my fault because I walked in thinking, I made it, I graduated the Q course.
Yeah.
I should be treated as an equal with all these guys that have been around.
You got a fancy green hat.
And I got the Special Forces tab, right? But that's not real. I have to now come and prove myself. So I think that's the key to showing up and being. The first step is having the humility to understand that you now have to prove yourself, and you should be expected to prove yourself, right? Because they want to know that you have the drive and the commitment to want to be a part of this organization and improve the organization, not just there for yourself.
Yep. I think that's key. I think that anybody of our audience listening right now, everyone's been a member of a team at some point in their lives, or they're about to go into that, whether that's out in a new job, whether that's truly a new detachment they're going to, a new unit if they're moving. Either way, there should be a team mentality. I always try to start my emails when I'm talking to people and peers and superiors, like, hey, team, just to kind of like annotate that I'm on the same, no, I'm not above anybody. I'm not your boss. I'm totally part of the team, and I'm here to work to earn credibility, earn that trust as part of the group, even if I'm new or have been there for a long period of time. And I think that being a member of that team comes with helping to figure out what the culture is of the team. I always kind of like that, like, being the hype person, the hype man, or even the kind of like the cheerleader for the team. It's, hey, you figure out what works for that team itself, which you got to be able to understand what the culture looks like and how people respond to it, and rally people around that team. In special operations, a lot of that culture comes down to say like logos or the detachment number, or the sticker or the patch, which kind of sets the tone for that team. And just being willing to expand that culture and highlight that to the people that you're around. It's not an in-your-face thing. It's hey, we have a nice, tight team culture, and we're all part of a group. We get along, we play along, we work hard together. That's kind of a mentality you want to have. I remember going to Special Forces Assessment Selection, SFAS, and you have something called Team Week. You're assessed as an individual, your own individual traits, cognitive, physical, land navigation, several tests. But then also there's this whole concept of how can you integrate to be a member of a team. You're a high-performing individual, but how can you motivate that other group of people who are directly attached to you? Like, you don't know these people at all, but you all come together. And how do you get the team to finish the test, the objective?
Are you willing to sacrifice for the greater good to accomplish the mission, not just what suits you or what helps you out? I think another key is anytime you go to a new position or anytime you come to a new team, you should always be on probation. Always, because you got to prove yourself again, right? I think a lot of people, when they graduate the respective qualification courses in the military, like, they come with the same attitude I had. I have arrived. I've made it, right? And I probably didn't realize that until way later in my career, maybe too late. But even as an E9 walking into someone, nobody cares that you're an E9. Just you're on probation. Like, what are you doing? What are you bringing to the table for us here? We've seen plenty of people that have all the badges, and today they still suck, right? So it's a thing. People only care what you're doing, what you're bringing to the table today.
I'd heard a quote: "You're only as good as your last foxhole," which again, everything, or your last fighting position. You're only as good as your last fighting position. Everything previous to that, all the movement you'd made and the progress, that's great. Congratulations. I'm sure that was a good time. You did well. You have some accolades or some pride, but don't hang your hat on that. Yeah. You step into that new role as a member of a team, or get the opportunity to lead a new team. You better be working your ass off to earn the credit and credibility of the group, earn trust and respect, but also do good on behalf of that group, i.e. care about them, be empathetic, be humble, and be willing to share your advice and your mentorship to them, and to progress the team all together. And that's what it's about. I think your comments are great because you can't hang your hat on the things that you have earned graduating from one of our qualification courses. Like, you are an RSOF graduate. Like, welcome to the regiment. You should be proud. But you still have to earn the credibility of the guys who've gone before you. And every single day it's a privilege to get to step into a team room or walk the halls where special operations legends have gone before us and done amazing things on behalf of our nation. And so if you kind of soak that in and just continue to work your butt off moving forward, but for the greater good and with the team, I think you'll find successes.
And when you graduate, even for a Green Beret, he walks into a Special Forces company, everybody has a Special Forces tab. It doesn't mean anything. The only thing that thing means is you have a hall pass. You have the privilege to show up to work every day and earn the right to wear it.
That's it.
And that's it. That's all it means.
Yeah.
I want to transition to my first topic now, right from that, because we're talking about being a good member of a team.
Right in line.
Let's talk about rank and position entitlement.
Okay.
Something I've been trying to wrap my head around lately because I see it more and more. And the argument came about because people were debating on what's the difference between, a special operations E6 and an E7. People are like, well, there's no difference. Everybody makes E7 in this realm. And I think it's dangerous for one. And maybe that is the case a lot of times, but it shouldn't be because the Army pays you more money to be an E7. They expect you to know more. And this kind of goes into, we're making fun of professional military education at the beginning here because I'm going to take every chance I get to do a jab at an officer and the fact that you get a very long schooling cycle compared to NCOs. But it ties into something I want to talk about here, and I have talked about recently to people, is we're not entitled to that next rank. When you move to any new rank or you move to any new position, it comes with more responsibility, especially in the Army. If you're going to move from captain to major, the Army expects you to know more, understand more, and take on more responsibility. And with that comes on a lot of stuff that is pretty dumb half the time, right? But it's part of the job. It's part of, attaining that next rank is also dealing with the stupidity that comes with it, the bureaucracy that comes with it a lot of times. And you're not entitled to make that rank, so you can also decline your orders. So if you just want to stay as an E6 and be really good at shooting and breaching and driving and doing all the fun stuff, there's no harm in it. Just decline your orders and stay as an E6 and do that. But if you're going to promote to those next ranks, you've got to be willing to take a step back because the Army expects you to be a good chess piece at that point. You're really good at being that chess piece, a junior leader, understanding your job, understanding the tactical level. But then at that one point for NCOs, that delta is when you move to E7. Now the Army expects you to take a step back and educate yourself on what it takes to be a good chess player. And to do that, you have to understand the rules of the game. Because if you want to dominate a game or win a game, you must first understand the rules, right?
We've talked about this a lot on our episodes.
So you have to take a step back and understand more and realize that you should take on more responsibility as you move up in those ranks or you move up in positions. There's more that you should be doing because that's how the Army works, right? Or just be comfortable with understanding that, okay, I'm going to retire at this rank. And there's no shame in that, right?
So that's now new for officers. So kind of across the board, across the Army for non-commissioned officers and officers, you can decline progress to the next rank or promotion to the next rank. Not common, but that is the option. And I think what you're hitting on, Chuck, too, is if you assess yourself as not being ready yet for greater responsibility.
Or not even wanting it.
Or not wanting it. Again,
that's fine.
Not everybody wants to be a team sergeant. Not everybody wants to be a field grade officer. And it's not uncommon, actually. Not everybody wants to be a commander or a command sergeant major or a part of a command team. And that's okay. But what I think you're hitting at, too, is you have to do a good assessment of yourself and know that just because you have set time in grade doesn't mean you are prepared for that next job. Mm-hmm. I think the Army does do a really good job of educating and training people for that next position. We have milestone schooling, of which you're at the non-commissioned officer academy, so you oversee a lot of that.
Yeah, you can't promote. Well, there's waivers, right? But the way it's supposed to happen is you don't promote to your next rank until you've gone to the appropriate professional military education, and that applies to non-commissioned officers and warrant officers.
Yep, that's spot on. If you're not prepared for that next rank, do a good self-assessment and okay, I need a little bit more time, or I need to surround myself or go seek out somebody who is in that position and doing it well and learn from them, absorb, really kind of understand how they're approaching it and how you can apply those really attributes into the way that you should be leading at that next responsibility. So at E6 and E7, pretty big difference. And an E7 rank across our Army is a very significant rank.
It's a big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a big deal rank, and when you promote to that rank, or even if you're on a different element, you're going to promote to the senior E6 level, it's a team, right? We said that's not just, we failed at this because the team leader in that E8 or the E7 failed. No, everybody failed. And also, if you do well, everybody did well. It's a team. It's not just, I'm going to shirk the responsibility here. It's everybody's responsibility, right?
You're telling me that if it came down to the fourth quarter and the field goal kicker missed a field goal, that all the weight of the failure of that game or that loss of the game falls on that kicker? Absolutely not.
Nope.
It probably throughout the entirety of that 60 minutes on the gridiron of the field, there were things that each member of that team, offense, defense, special teams, coaching, could have done better, and it just the way the outcome came at the end was he's just happened to be the person when time ran out. But yeah, I think you're spot on right there, Chuck.
Yeah, and then when it comes to the PMEs, right, the professional military education, most people in our line of work, they're not excited about going to those things. Maybe officers, because you guys get to, again, we talked about like you get to go to the beach and hang out and chill out for a year. But
play a little bit of golf.
At least for golf. At least for NCOs, we don't really enjoy going or look forward to going to these courses and educating ourselves, because it's not training. There's a difference between training and education, right? Now, on the educational level, you have to understand these things to play the game more effectively, and they're not sexy courses. It's generally a bunch of information like planning, training management, national security strategy, funding lines, stuff that...
The things that are going to make you a better decision maker at the next rank?
Stuff you're not going to go home and read at night because you're excited about these topics. But they help you to be that chess player and eventually that chess master, because some of those bureaucratic things, they might be dumb. They might be waste of time in some aspects, but the reality is those are the rules of the game, and like we always say, the rules of the game, they don't care about your opinion. If you don't master those rules to get money, ammo, risk undersigned, because that's the language they speak above the company level. As an E7, you should probably know that, and especially as an E8 and an E9, you're not going to win. You're not going to get those things. Just because Bobby Tuttle thinks it's stupid that this memo has to be submitted at 120 days to get this particular training event, so you don't do it. Like there's other people playing the game, right? So there's other people playing the game, all those other teams in this resource constrained environments we have, they're going to get that. They probably said, yes, this is stupid, but I'm going to do this anyway, and they're going to get that thing. And then you're going to be mad, and you're going to be complaining in your team room that, oh, the rules are dumb. Like, no, you should just submit the memo. Yeah, maybe it is dumb, but who cares?
Well, the rules were made up for a purpose, right? The rules were made up because it's within the fiscal realm to provide resources for that event. Well, the rules were made up to keep the machine running, organized and efficiently, because you know that memo, for example, has to hit different wickets at different time to inform people to prepare to purchase things.
A lot of times they make sense once you dig behind the curtain a little bit and you see, okay, this does take time and energy, but I understand why that rule's in place or why I have to do this. And even though it is an inconvenience, and the majority of our team probably isn't going to understand why we have to do this. This is what we have to do to make this thing happen. And that's how PMEs are designed. Like, they give you that higher level of thinking so you can think critically. When we talk about thinking critically, I think people throw that term out there and don't really understand what it means. But if you look at like Bloom's taxonomy and stuff like that, it has a whole chart that leads up to a critical thing. But the reality is, to think critically, you understand enough about something to where you can break it down into its individual components or its lowest common denominator and understand it in depth there, and then put it all back together in different ways, shapes, and forms, and have enough of an understanding to where you can mold that and understand it however you need to, right? Because down to you get data, and then you change data into information, and then you change the information into some kind of knowledge, and you change that knowledge into some kind of education, and then you can take that education and think critically about something, right? That's what PME is designed for, is to teach you these non-sexy things in a way to where you truly understand it. And you don't know just enough to be dangerous, but you know enough to apply it in any way, shape, or form. 2
questions for you, Chuck. First question, so we're talking PME, Professional Military Education. Again, Chuck is the Deputy Commandant here at our Non-Commissioned Officer Academy. Was there a favorite PME course that you guys run that you went through, or one that you most enjoyed because it opened your aperture a little bit more to something you're interested in, or best prepared you specifically for going back and being a member of a Special Forces, 3rd Special Forces Group?
I'm not sure that I've actually enjoyed any of the PMEs we go through. I mean, going down to Tampa, going to the Joint Special Operations Enlisted course was pretty cool, because you're in Florida, right? It's kind of our closest thing.
Oh, so geography matters, right?
It does. But I've never been like, oh man, that was this. I love learning all this stuff. For instance, I had to read, TRADOC pamphlet 350-70-9 or whatever. It's the budget and resourcing document for academic institutions. It sounds great, doesn't it? Like you want to open this thing up and read it.
See the look on my face right now.
I had to read that thing like 4 times, and I still don't understand everything that was in there. But last year when they were going to cut our budget by half, I was like, okay, this isn't going to happen. But I can't just walk in here and tell the CG I need more money. So I opened that thing up, read it, did all my homework, and then created this whole reasoning using the rules to my advantage. I said, look, I didn't make up these rules. This is what they are. So according to this, the math comes out to I'm going to get $245,000, right? Or whatever it was, right? Okay, can't really argue against that. And you get what you want because you take the rules that you're not excited about learning. So to go back to your question, I don't think I've ever been excited about going to a PME. In fact, I run this, I'm in charge of our senior leader courses here. The Commandant runs them. I assist him in running them. But I almost got kicked out of the senior leader course twice, right? Like, I find it's kind of like your kid. You get onto your kid about things that you probably did too. Like, hey, why did your grades suck? And he looks at you and he's like, well, I saw your report card. Your grades suck too. But you care about him. You don't want to make the same mistakes, right? So you get to, as you grow in rank, you also get to be a hypocrite. Unfortunately, that kind of sucks. But it's just part of maturing. Everybody's allowed to mature and moving up. So everything that I tell soldiers probably not to do, I probably did something very similar. Right? Hey, take the senior leader course in PME. It's important. Take it that way because you need to know these rules. But when I was going through it, I hated it. I probably bitched about it the whole time too. I don't know. Like
you're making me think of that scene in Old School. Great movie, by the way. You got Vince Vaughn, Luke Wilson going back to college, joining a fraternity on campus there. And I remember that scene because they're trying to get their fraternity sanctioned on campus because I think they just got thrown off. And they have to go through like the academic decathlon thing.
Yeah.
But anyways, you got Jeremy Piven playing Dean Pritchard. And I remember there's a scene there where his like executive assistant comes into his office and is like, hey, apparently these guys are actually really good at paperwork. Half of the fraternity is actually all lawyers, and they're kind of nerdy portrayed. But like, they're really good at paperwork. And actually they found a loophole, so they do have the right. They know the rules to get into this tryout to be able to be a sanctioned fraternity on campus. And that's making me think of that right there.
Yeah, right. That's how it is, right?
I was like, yep, it's not the sexiest stuff, but one, it's there for a reason. Two, if you learn it, go outside of your way to learn the rules to that, then you can use them to your advantage. You can play the game correctly. You can call out people when they're not citing the rules correctly, or they're not.
You don't have to be slave to the rules either.
No.
Right? It's the whole box theory. Special operations people love to say, well, we don't use doctrine. I operate outside the box. Right? It's like, no, man. Like, you still got the box. If you understand the box and stuff that's in there, maybe it doesn't apply to you. If you know it, right, you can probably use it as a springboard to be innovative and operate outside the box. But a lot of times when you're just adaptive and use small unit tactics that are basic infantry stuff, right? The stuff works.
You're just doing it with a different style,
you're just doing it with
or a different partner.
The principles are the same,
weapon
right?
system.
Yes, you don't got to be slaved to the rules all the time, but you at least got to understand the rules before you start being innovative and operating outside the box. You can't just start from, because if you do that, you're just pulling it out of your ass. You're not really operating outside the box. You're just doing things.
Yeah. The second question I wanted to ask you though. So again, you're an E9. How many years in service do you have, Chuck?
24.
24 years in service. So you've been around quite a while. Very accomplished career. If you haven't checked out our Forged in Fire episode, it talks a lot about Chuck. A great interview with him and Jimmy Dottiel, and really a lot of kind of Chuck's road to where he is now. But of all the ranks, E1 through E9 that you have had the privilege of pinning on in our Army, is there one that stands out that just means the most from your personal perspective, or was one that you took most pride in, for whatever reasons?
That's a really hard question to answer. I joke all the time about writing a book called Don't Become a Sergeant Major, because once you peek behind that curtain and you see
cares about haircuts and grass,
some of the stuff that goes on at levels higher than...
Just kidding. PT belts.
Yeah, PT belts. But there's a lot of stuff that goes on at levels higher than reality. You're like, what are we doing sometimes? But and you can't. I loved being ignorant, just as an E7 or an E8, to where you didn't know what was going on. You didn't realize that out of 18 teams in a battalion, not all those teams are great, and what it takes to actually get the money and all the stuff that goes into it. You're just like, hey, where's my $15,000? This is so stupid that I don't have it. Why can't I just have 50,000 rounds of ammo in my team room?
Not every team or mission event is the primary effort.
No,
is the main effort.
So probably an E7. You make E7, you make pretty good money.
Okay.
People think you're a big deal.
Eligible for lots of schools.
Eligible for lots of schools, and you're blissfully ignorant about all the stuff that your team sergeant has to worry about, right? But the reality is in E7, you should be involved. That's why I do fully support the way the STEP program has been implemented in the Army, and I raged against it. I thought it was the dumbest, like everything, I thought it was the dumbest thing ever until I started thinking about it.
What's the STEP program, Chuck?
Select, train, educate, and promote. So it says you will be selected for promotion, but if you want to promote, you will go to the appropriate PME first, and then you can promote, because then it arms you with the knowledge you need to come back and be an effective member of the team, like we talked about. So once you make E7, you come back to a team, you should be doing more. And really, if I look back to E7, I should have been doing more. I should have been more involved with all that stuff that, thought was stupid and didn't make any sense. To continue to be a good member of a team, you can't keep doing what you were doing in the past either, right? You got to constantly evolve. Now you're becoming a senior member of a team. You've been there longer and more than the new guys, so you should mentor them. That should be something that you take responsibility for, and take more responsibility for helping out the team leadership, right? So it's not just, I'm good, like we said, You have to reinvent yourself every day and bring something to the table every day. And as you stay there longer and you move up, then you got to provide more if you want to remain a relevant member of the team, right? So it's just a constant reinvention, right? You can't just ever rest on your laurels and, come in, be humble, be a good team member that cares, but also understand that every day you have to bring more competence to gain that trust. And if you just sit there and you're just that guy that wants to remain an E6 forever, that's cool. Just be honest with people, like, hey, I don't want to take on a responsibility. I just want to be this E6, right? That's cool. People probably respect you for that.
Yep, because you're being honest. You assessed yourself. You've reflected on what you think you want to do, and that's okay too. But it doesn't mean you get to stop being stellar and stop, crushing it, and stop continuing to improve yourself and those around you. You're not going to take on more responsibility.
Yeah, just like an officer, right? Like as a captain in Army Special Operations, you get to do some amazing things, like some really cool stuff. But you're like, man, I'm going to go to ILE and come back as a major. You have to be okay with the fact that you're going to come back and be doing a lot of paperwork, getting yelled at by the battalion commander, and then having to learn how budgets work and, mission concepts. And it's just what it is, right? You had a lot of fun as a captain. Now you get to come back and put yourself in these situations that aren't always the most fun, right?
They're not always the most fun, but I think when you approach those positions, you go into them. Some of the most rewarding positions I had were after Special Forces Detachment commander time. Again, there's nothing quite like being a dive team commander in Okinawa, Japan.
Required a totally different mindset there, didn't it? You had to reinvent yourself.
Completely. And you had to be able to shift focus from, okay, I'm going to be a commander at a 12-man partnership ability killing machine, willing to integrate with partner force across the globe and jump, dive, shoot, move, communicate, medicate, sustain.
You were a killing machine? You don't have those killer eyes. Remember that movie?
But yeah, then you go to ILE, you get broadened, you see how you fit into the larger picture, how your tool set and your background fits into the national defense strategy, and then you're expected to go and understand how you can now employ and synchronize 6 of those teams with other functions that come together and latch onto them.
So it made you got to change your mindset too, right? Because you have to still come to work every day doing something different and not have a bad day because you forced yourself to have a bad day mentally. Right?
I'd say in the special operations realm, I know you actually spoke to the
language students and the captain's career course as well.
Yeah, so you spoke to them about
the mindset, about
mindset. But in Army Special Operations, where we are right here in the heart and center at Fort Bragg, you're going to do cool stuff. You're going to jump out of airplanes. You're going to do military skydiving or free fall. You're going to do subsurface infiltration.
Things other people never get to do.
Never. You see about
people pay to do those things.
Yeah.
We get paid to do them.
Yeah, you're going to blow stuff up. You're going to get to go speak languages. You're going to go work at an embassy. You're going to go travel. You can go be alone and unafraid in the jungles of nowhere, eating ants and eating snakes and stuff. Like it's all that cool stuff. But you're also going to be asked to build a PowerPoint slide or write a paper or draft an email or message and communicate up and out of what you're doing. You're going to be asked to be a marketing expert.
I mean, you do those so you can do all the great things that you get to do. So yeah, there's always some weird stuff or stuff that you don't like to do here, but then it allows you to do other great things. As you get in rank, there's more stuff like that you got to do. But it enables you to now, as a major, you get to ensure 18 other teams get to do all those cool things, right? And that's pretty rewarding, right?
And hopefully, as you're a major, they ask you to come do it with them. I mean, you go out on go see the guys, check in on them, offer an 04's weight with your partner force, go do some battlefield circulation.
Because you got to get out of that office sometime.
Yeah, you definitely do. You get to go see guys in action, though. You get to make sure they're doing the right thing, but also, hey, what can you take off their plate? What resources can you get them? And then you're expected to provide top cover and go fight for them.
And then you can mentor, too. You take the time to, hey, guys, let me run you through some things I did good and bad. And then you're responsible, or you have the opportunity to have that positive impact on all those around you, right?
When you spoke to LREC, the language students, and the Captain's Career Course, are there any things that you talked about from your past 24 years in service that were not Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria combat related?
Yeah,
you got to do as a Green Beret.
The fact, out of 12 combat deployments, and I've come back on a medevac, critically wounded on 3 of them. Those aren't the best memories I have out of my whole career. The best, most fun memories that I have were all the other things that we got to do.
What?
We're at Red Flag in Nevada, just dropping bombs, doing all kinds of crazy stuff. At one point, we had a UAV, and we're surveilling people and rolling people up. And then some, okay, now you're going to go down to Florida, and you're going to be hanging out in boats for 3 weeks, hitting targets with sim rounds or whatever. And then, okay, now you're going to go to Mid-South Shooting Institute, and a truck's going to pull up with so much ammo that it takes hours to download it, and you're shooting so much during the week that your fingers are just sore. Right?
Thousands of rounds.
Or you're going to go to Griffin Group, and you're going to be in cars pitting each other, learning how to do police maneuvers, shooting each other with paintballs. Just amazing things that are just incredible, and it's just a lot of fun. But there's stuff that comes with it, right? You have to do your online training, which we all love.
You have to submit the packet,
right.
And you have to have a.
But you do that so you can do that stuff.
Yeah.
You get to do all this great stuff. And even as an E9, people ask me all the time, "Oh, it must suck because you're a slave in office." I never have a bad day at work. The things I get to do.
For our listeners, Chuck does come visit me in the Commanders Initiatives group regularly to come check and make sure the three majors up there in the think tank the morale is high.
Yeah, just all kinds of stuff like, okay, you guys are majors, and why do you keep putting 2 space after this periods? Because the new 25-50 says 1 space after period. What are you guys doing? Stuff like that, using the rules to my advantage to just harass an officer. Anyway, like I get to go spend time at the captain's career course and teach, going over to the warrant officer course. I can pick a classroom during one of our senior leader courses or whatever and go instruct unit training management. You're getting that mentorship time. And then now, like yesterday, I went out to Range 44, right? There was a team out there. They invited me to come talk about T-Tri-C, which is, basically medical things out there, because I've had the experience of doing trauma medicine and treating people, but also taking 4 machine gun rounds in combat and understanding what that's like. So
I would say even, working here at the John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Center, we're like, okay, let's start up a podcast called Pineland Underground.
Exactly. We get to do this cool stuff, right?
Talk to Medal of Honor recipient Matt Williams and have these types of discussions.
Have guys like Kyle Lamb, down in a pub talking to him for 2 hours and just meeting awesome people.
Whether that's overseas, at whatever theater, augmenting Secret Service, it's working with cool partner forces, or that's getting to meet dignitaries from other countries and get to go see how they apply things at the State Department, going up to Washington D.C., or it's just you're flying on a non-standard bird, jumping out of an airplane, or getting to go talk to high school kids who are interested in joining the service, like all these cool things.
Badass, right? But here, I got a question for you. So I've made it from E1 to E9, right? 24 years in the military. How many years have you been in?
I just hit 15.
So you hit 15 and you're in 04. So
Correct.
you made it. So you've from 1 to 4. So you still have all these levels above you, right? So my whole career from 1 to 9, I've probably had the privilege of doing a total of 6 months of PME, right? And you just from 01 to 04, you've had like 7 years of professional military education where you've got to get away.
So I attended the Naval Postgraduate School out in Monterey,
California. In California, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So most ILE, or our Command and General Staff College, is about 11 months. So it's 1 year, pretty rigorous ILE.
And you're working towards your master's, right?
Well, so
for that one, for the War College type stuff.
For CGSC, last I checked, the actual master's degree was not intertwined into the actual portion. So most of your master's level classes through the University of Kansas, I believe.
So they give you the time to go for all that.
That's all at night.
Yeah.
That's all at night.
Isn't? But you're dedicated to that block, though, right? Or no?
You don't have to do it. It's not mandatory.
Oh, really?
Yep. You don't have to get a master's. There's no master's requirement. There's no graduate level education requirement to make lieutenant colonel. It just happens to be that most or the majority of.
But up to a graduate degree, you're allowed that time that's dedicated, correct?
Mm-hmm. But you also get a active duty service obligation. So you pay the piper at the end.
And as NCOs, they just say, hey, we're not going to give you the time. But if you want to be competitive, you better sacrifice some family time to get this degree.
Well, I know Command Sergeant Major Fancher is fighting very hard, and SWCC does run the boards. And so I know they're working with the Army to make sure the billeting is good and the funding. But there's a huge push to get.
We're getting there. We're into you now, too,
officers.
Right?
Yep. National Defense University here at Bragg, Naval Postgraduate School out in Monterey.
But I will say, in my whole career, I said, hey, continuing education is more than just a college degree, right? So I've really put it off until recently. I'm going for more degree in strategic studies, but I'm kicking myself in the ass because I've really enjoyed the course. I mean, I've talked to you several times, like, oh man,
you want to have academic discussions about the papers you're writing, the articles you're reading.
I'm like,
right
man,
now.
This stuff is super interesting, and I wish I would have known a lot of this course material in depth. Like, I knew about pretty much all of it at a surface level, but really digging into a lot of this has been really awesome. And if I could go back in time and do that again, I would have taken advantage of the fact that the military does pay for the majority of your college, and you just got to dedicate some time at night to do it.
But Chuck, why is college important? Why is that important for our soldiers to get higher levels of education, or even just to pursue their bachelor's degree?
It really depends on what you're going for, right? I'd say that if you're going for an education and a degree towards graphic design, but you're an 18 series person, like, that's probably not going to help specifically right then. But if you're going for a degree with curriculum that applies, I mean, history for one, right, is extremely important. And just understanding, again, it goes back to that critical thinking piece. Can you think critically about certain items and understand what you're talking about? But then, too, as you move up in rank, if I'm partnered with an officer like you or a colonel, they want me to be able to communicate on the same level as them. They don't care that I can kick in a door or that I can breach something or shoot well. They don't care because it doesn't matter. I have to be able to advise this officer and then sit in a room with highly educated people and be able to speak at that level about whatever subject we're talking about. Right? And I think a lot of times E9s, they become irrelevant because they just allowed themselves to become irrelevant. Not just continuing education as far as college, but also continuing education, and like we talked about, all the stuff that applies to the rules of the game, understanding what those are. At that level, I got to know about funding lines and national strategy and all these words and what the rules are. Mm-hmm. So we can have that conversation. I can advise that officer because now I'm bringing the experience with the education, whereas a lot of times the officer has the education,
but may not have the experience.
They don't have the experience. But if you can combine those two, that's pretty powerful. And as an NCO, it's cool because he's the one taking responsibility. So even if my advice sucks and he gets in trouble, it's like, oh, that's the officer's thing. He's the commander. Sucks for him.
Shout out to my Sergeant Major, who I was paired up with many times out at 1st Special Forces Group, but Sergeant Major Danny Nisthal. He used to mentor our team sergeants, our E8s, on the importance of education. And one is, like you just said, communication.
Yeah.
Two, it really opens that aperture for our guys just to understand how they, in the Army, as a tool of the national defense strategy, fit into that. Mm-hmm. What does that actually mean? There's some pretty high-level thought across academia, across international relations. But again, at the ground level, how do you help the person on the ground who is the decision maker on that ground about what they're doing and the purpose of them being there fits into that big picture? He was a huge advocate of it, graduated from the University of Washington for his master's. But again, I kind of see it that exact same way. And then also, it definitely helps set you up for success whenever it's time to transition out. Leave the military, retire, ETS. That does hold weight. Your degree, your level of education definitely holds weight on the civilian sector. It's not the thing you should hang your hat on, just like a Green Beret or just like...
If the military is paying for it, why not, right? Yeah. And it's really not taking that much time. And if you can find some extremely good universities that offer online programs that the curriculum is to a point to where even though you're not in class, you're still learning a ton.
Yeah.
And you can't get good grades unless you put forward the effort towards understanding the required reading and having those discussions.
I will tell you, so at my time out at the Naval Postgraduate School, though, and I could probably talk to you for an entire episode about this, the things that opened up to me were I got to put grades, so academics, self, and family, all were kind of things I got to focus on after having spent 3 years on a detachment. So a lot of time away, a lot of time, pressure on the body.
I got to go to a PME after 10 years on a detachment. That's pretty cool. Anyway.
But what I also got to do is I got to meet people across all the different services. So even though it was the Naval Postgraduate School, it's completely joint. So I had international partners, I had Marines, I had Air Force, I had pilots, I had State Department officials, Homeland Security would be in these classes with me. So we got to share. You got to learn from each other in a non-threatening environment and just share each other's perspectives. And in that geographic location of Monterey, California, you know me, big golf fan, so it's literally in Pebble Beach, California. So very nice outdoors area, a great hub for people coming from Silicon Valley, up in San Francisco, Menlo Park, and then you got Carmel, you got Big Sur. So all these it's this perfect mixing bowl. So you have incredible staff and faculty who are all civilians from very highly accredited universities. And then as a good SF guy, I partnered with Filipino 06 during the Battle of Marawi, that 2015-16 when that was going on. We did our thesis together. I'm a first group guy. I'm a Tagalog speaker. He was an awesome partner. We went out and visited the Philippines and got some on-the-ground research. Finished my thesis early, which was fantastic, and then the rest of the quarter I was able to get published, and then went up to Facebook headquarters and the Apple headquarters up there and got to see what they were doing in the innovation realm and talk to other veterans and soft people who are working up there. And so for me, that was just personally broadening, and they got to take that kind of mindset back and be a staff person and then a leader back at 1st Special Forces Group.
I mean, it's pretty comparable to, say, an NCO that's been on a team for 4 years, and they get a chance to come to the senior leader course, right? Not exactly the same, but you get to hang out in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and if you stay at Moon Hall, your mattress may or may not have somebody pee on it to the point to where there's actually pee under on the carpet where it's soaked through. So it's comparable, right?
Chuck, here's a question for you, man. So every single person in Army Special Operations had their first day, first walk into the team room. Tell me what yours was like, and what was that like as far as getting into the team room and being welcomed or getting that rite of passage in that kind of probationary period when you first got to your team?
So mine was a little bit different because I graduated the Q course, went out, instructed at the Q course because I was in the infantry and I had an EIB. So I really met my team. I was getting off of Chinook in Afghanistan, and the ramp drops, and there's a bunch of dudes in shorts with their shirts off, all tan, with beards, with glasses on, and they're like, put your shit in the truck and get in. And then as I already
It reminds
said,
me of that scene in like G.I. Joe.
and I showed up thinking that I'd made it and I should be treated as an equal. So I didn't do myself any favors. So I just got crushed the first couple of weeks. But to give you a better picture of probably how it should be, or maybe just what I found worked as a team sergeant, if you showed up as a new guy to the detachment, again, you're on probation. So you show up and right away you get your first counseling by the team sergeant, which is, look, you're a new guy. You will prove yourself. You're on a 6-month probationary period that's broken down into 2 blocks. The first 3 months is this. You are not allowed to call anybody by their first name, period, right? You'll be the guy that takes out the trash. You will do these things. Here's the standard. Just go on the list of what it is expected of them physically, where they need to be, just a whole list of stuff. And then the next day that he comes in, there's 2 tables set up, and it's all the seniors on the team, and they get the brief from then of what it means to be a part of the team history, and what it's going to take for him to go from that day to the 3-month mark. And then they slide him a pile of books, which was the Ranger Handbook. At the time, it was 7-8, and then 318-8 and -10, which is your infantry rifle platoon, and then company level operations. We told him, okay, you're going to get these books, and in 30 days, we're going to give you a written test. It's a 50-question, small unit tactics test, stuff that's right out of the infantry, right out of infantry doctrine. And he would take that test, and if he didn't pass it, then he had to take it again. And then also at the 3-month mark, he was going to take a week-long volley physical test. It was the SOCOM test. He had to do a 1,500-meter surface swim because we're a Mare Ops team, and just a number of stuff, 8PFT, all that good stuff. He was expected to get a certain score on those things, and then he had to show his proficiency with radios and everything at these certain tests. It was also incumbent upon the seniors to mentor this guy. And then if he made it past the 3-month mark, then he had the right to call people by their first name, but he didn't have full voting rights because between 3 and 6 months, there was a number of other gates. And at 6 months, we came together and we voted on if this guy was, if he had what it took to be a member of the team. Had he shown that he wants to be more or about more than just himself, and he wants to take pride in the detachment, and he's going to represent the detachment well. At that point in time, if you got voted in, we brought you in and we just crushed you with everything good and bad about you. And then if you made it, you got the team belt buckle with a leather belt, which is the rite of passage. And you get that belt buckle taken away in point in time. As people got fired from the team, they lost their belt buckle to exit out, put on the wall, all right, because that was the thing. And that seems kind of dumb, but that gave that person the feeling they'd earned it as well, right? Created that team pride. Like, if you want to be in this detachment and we're going to say we're better than everybody else, then we have to actually do that, and we have to be driven to be a part of that. And oddly enough, one of the guys that was probably, to this day, he's probably the best Special Forces guy that I've ever seen, a guy named Ross Morris. If you listen to this, he just came over from across the fence back to 3rd Special Forces Group. He signed in as an operations sergeant, and his sergeant major, he's like, hey, you know this guy? He just signed in. I'm like, yo, man, it's the best. That's the best team I've ever seen. But he's one of the ones that spearheaded that whole initiation process, right? Mm-hmm. He's like, hey, let's create this, this, and this, and this. And the team actually took pride in the other ones. I didn't make that stuff. They're like,
they ran with it, right?
This is what we're going to build. And even when you looked at the senior slots on the team, there's generally 4 senior slots in an 18 Fox. It should be your most senior guy usually on the team. Well, we only allowed for 4 senior board positions, right? So there's always one guy vying for that. So you had to earn your right there too. So even if you were a made man, it was competitive to get voted in to hold one of those 4 slots too. So it kept guys you've never earned it, and you can get fired at any point in time. But that's just an example. But I think that's important to always understand that you should be on probation coming in, and you should earn it, and you shouldn't think that you haven't arrived. I don't know, what about you? Like, what did you guys have when you came on?
Yes, I had a unique experience as well. I graduated the Q course, so right here at Fort Bragg. PCS'd immediately to Okinawa, Japan, right after I married my wife. And then as soon as I got there, I knew we were going. Essentially, we were going straight to Afghanistan. 1st Battalion, 1st Special Forces Group was already over there. It was Bravo Company, so the one company over in Afghanistan. And this was the last combat rotation for the battalion in quite a while. That was on the kind of playbook. And so me and 2 other captains who went through the course together knew that there was one detachment available, ODA 1125. Their team leader had come back. His wife delivered their baby, and he was going to take another job. So the team was open. It was a combat dive team. And so we interviewed with the company commander who was downrange and determined that it would be me who had the opportunity to go just try out for the probationary period. So I got to Afghanistan, got picked up by a bunch of dudes on dirt bikes with beards and Oakleys, and I got my brand new ops core and brand new Patagonias, and it's like, all right, welcome to Afghanistan. So get to the team though, and they hadn't had a team leader in probably about 2 months, and very much we're doing operations. There was just a few months left in the rotation for them, but very much a probationary period. So I had to continuously, take charge because I was automatically the guy responsible for the team. But 2, I had to know that I was not the most combat savvy guy on the team, as I had just gotten there to Afghanistan, which was my second trip, but this first time as the leader of the team. Mm-hmm. My whole way of approaching it was, be empathetic, be humble, when in charge, kind of be in charge, but also be constantly learning and asking from the guys, as they knew the terrain, the landscape.
It's harder as an officer, right? Because now you're in charge, but also in 2 years, there's no way you can learn everything you need to learn. So that's got to be that ultimate balance of humility and being in charge, right?
And it was, how do I continue the pressure of what we were doing in that area of Afghanistan and keep up, really keep up the fight and, consolidate gains and continue the mission that they'd been doing for months. But also, I'm getting my feet wet as that new captain who just come from the course. And so I'm still learning from the team. And so I had the team sergeant in my hip pocket the entirety of the time, my JTACs right next to me, pointing things out, coaching me through where enemy threats were, where the aircraft were. It was learning as you go from the fire hose. And all of this, knowing that this was a combat dive team, I was a non-diver at the time because I'd just gotten to the battalion. I was slated to come back and go to dive school in Key West when we returned. And so I still had this probationary period of I'm on the ground.
And dive teams are notorious for being even more,
a little bit.
what's
the right
call
word?
Hazing, but they're like, hey, if you want to be a part of this, like you really have to earn it, like to the point where you're carrying around a paddle if you're the new guy. Did you have to do that?
I didn't carry around a paddle.
No.
But it was if I didn't pass dive school, arguably one of the most rigorous courses in our military.
Behind air assault. Anyway.
Behind sapper. But, if I didn't pass, then that would not be the team leader anymore.
Nope.
And so very much not only am I learning on the ground in combat and then still responsible for everybody on the ground and those combat operations, but also I have to come back, spend about 2 weeks, 3 weeks to prepare to go to dive school. Mm-hmm. And then if I don't pass, my stuff, my kit box will likely be in the hallway, and I'll become like the company, XO, or I'll be moving to a different position. Luckily, I had a good bond with the team. They're pretty battle hardened, had spent a lot of time on the ground, phenomenal senior guys. They taught and coached and mentored me as I was the guy in charge, though. And I developed a good working relationship with them all. Came back, was prepared, crushed dive school, and then came back, and all of a sudden, you are now authorized to rock the dive patch, the team logo. You got a coin, you'd earned it, and then eligible to get the tattoo, the team tattoo
on your lower back,
wherever you want it. So for our listeners who are in the course or about to graduate the course or even thinking about it, you hit those milestones, but you're always being assessed. There's always a next ridge line where you have to continue to prove yourself. But for people who come into our special operations regiment, that's what we assess and select for. That's what we're looking for, is guys and gals who understand the value of continuing to work hard, be a member of that team. Even if you're not the most knowledgeable person, you could be thrown in as the decision maker, like the person solely responsible
and always learning
for the welfare, but always willing to learn and then taking critical feedback to get yourself better for the benefit of the people who you're working with.
Yep. Just understanding that you're allowed to fail, right? You shouldn't be defeated, but that's how you learn, right? To make mistakes and learn from that. And if you've checked your ego to the point to where you can take that feedback and adjust what you're doing to become better, then that's really what it's all about right there, right?
There you go. What's always cool is once you are accepted in that team, kind of after that probationary period, you get a seat at that table. You continue to earn. Again, you're still being assessed and selected every day, but it's a pretty good feeling of being welcomed into that organization. There's a great sense of camaraderie. You're part of the team, you're part of the group, and then now you continue to do that for the guys and gals on your left and right to work hard and make sure that everyone's moving the same
But I will say that the team sergeant has one additional duty, right? He has to check that team leader's ego. Because what I've seen with officers, great officers, have their egos checked constantly. If you let that ego get inflated too much and that balloon blows out the door, they can't ever come back from that hubris, right? So whether it's taking a little Debbie cake and just shoving it into your officer's wallet every 3 months, or putting icy hot all in his brown T-shirts on a Friday so when he takes a shower on a Monday, he puts it on. Whatever it is, but even on top of that, just making sure, hey, I'm here to mentor you. My goal is to make you number 1 at 18 or number 1 at 36, whatever it is. But to ensure that when you're doing that, you're also making sure that his ego doesn't get out of control. Because that's for real. Like, I've seen that a lot of officers that are really good, once they get to this point to where they're like, I have made it, or I've had the experience, and they start making decisions based off their ego versus reality. That's when they start going awry.
That's what's so cool in, I guess in the Army, really at large, but it's a, intimate in special operations, is you have your assigned partner. Like that, you continuously have that officer and the non-commissioned officer.
Your assigned partner is the NCO, your summer help is the officer, right?
and it's a command team. It's a command team. And again, that word team falls in there. When we had Shane Shorter out here, who's just got announced, he's the command sergeant major, a senior enlisted leader at SOCOM. But again, that helps officers advise, make decisions, bounce ideas off of.
It's got to go both ways, because that officer,
always,
he owes you his philosophy and those counselings, right? Because he's the guy in charge. But you're with experience. You also owe that to him. I remember one of my team leaders was pissed because I didn't know it was his birthday, but I gave him a negative counseling statement on his birthday. I was like, hey, this is how you're screwing this up, right? But we went over it, and he's like, yeah, you're right. But the same thing. If I was off, and it's weird, I'm giving him a counseling statement, he doesn't work for me, but it's my responsibility to ensure that he's on the right path. And he was pissed at first, like, yeah, you're right. Okay, how do we make this to where I'm not doing these things anymore? Yep. And he ended up, both the officers that I was partnered with ended up getting rated 1 out of 18 at one point, or 1 out of 36, whatever it was. So
how many hot dogs?
That one I was like, man, this guy's not.
How many hot dogs were in sleeping bags?
Yeah, I always put a hot dog in the bottom of the captain's sleeping bag once a week.
Feels weird against the toes, I bet.
Yeah. But things like that, right? Just small things like, hey, like, we're all human. We can all be messed with. Let's all keep our egos in check and be a little humble and just perform on top of that. If you can do all that, then that's what it is. Don't just rely on the fact that, hey, we did this last year. Like, okay, who cares? Yep. What can we do right now?
Hell yeah. It's a hell of a ride.
All right, Bobby, now it's your turn. In the Army so far, whether it's been in special operations or in your former job, what's the coolest thing that you've been able to do that you didn't see coming, that you didn't even think about doing?
Yeah, that's a tough one to answer. I would say, professionally, so like really in uniform, some of the coolest things I've gotten to do with the guys. There are some pretty cool opportunities when you're overseas. You're, again, brand new Q course graduate. All of a sudden, you've earned this right to be on a team, and all eyes are on you. Things are reflected on you. And getting to sit there and your JTACs in your hip pocket, your CCTs in your hip pocket, and all of a sudden you're in Afghanistan, working through a key leader engagement with your Afghan Special Forces partners, and somebody runs over from the Afghan counterpart side. It's like, hey, we've got movement, this Taliban movement over here on this ridge line, and you get to sit there and say, okay, cool, what do we do about this? All right, I can't see them, but hold on, let's call in some birds, call in some A5s to come over and just do flybys. And you're sitting there like, oh my God, like, I got a dude sitting here next to me controlling 2 to 3 aircraft who are basically buzzing the tower like they do in Top Gun to scare the living daylights out of the Taliban, or whatever force is maneuvering on you, and then go out and possibly drop bombs on them. Like, that's pretty incredible to think that you have that sort of, power's not the right word, but that sort of training and that level of competence to do something like that you, again, only kind of like see or maybe hear about in movies. 2 other pretty cool things I got the chance to do. One of them is when we were overseas with 1st Special Forces Group and 1st Battalion out in Okinawa. Lots of training events overseas. But you're constantly, every 2 or 3 weeks, you're jumping from country to country to go engage with a partner. JSETs or working out at the embassy. So you could be in a suit and tie one day advising the ambassador or working with the State Department, and all of a sudden you throw your camo uniform back on and you're jumping out of an airplane. Well, on the tail end of one training event, we were basically done with the training event, pretty low threat, awesome event. I think we'd been on the ground for about a month. I had my wife and my son fly in on Space Available, so Space A, on a C-17 from Okinawa, Japan, down to the Philippines. And, so here I am, I'm rocking a polo shirt and, some khaki pants. I get to walk over to the aircraft or walk onto the tarmac, and I speak Tagalog to the people who are like running the tarmac, let them know that I'm senior ranking Army guy, Special Forces officer. I go talk to the Marine, U.S. Marine, who's countered with that guy, and just explain that I've got some pretty important cargo flying on this flight. It's my wife and my new son. And I get to go basically get escorted out onto the tarmac. Ramp drops, and my 1-year-old blonde-haired, blue-eyed son runs off the back of the ramp. And my wife and son are the only two on the C-17. So I pick them up, get to escort them through customs with their passports and everything. I speak Tagalog to everybody. And then that day, we're doing an airborne op, again, the tail end of our training event. So I think we're doing closing ceremonies. And then I'm going to take leave with my family in country. Definitely encourage for guys to do so because you're already there and space available. It costs nothing. And so my son got to be in the drop zone when I'm jumping in on the ground. And he comes over and helps me pick up my parachute and stuff. And I got a really cool picture of my son Weston greeting me with my parachute. So that's kind of cool. Got to do that. And another opportunity, I worked at the Joint Readiness Training Center.
Oh my God!
Of which my dad is also a former.
That's another CTC plug.
When my dad's an SF guy, he works out there. So for about a year and a half, I got to work with my dad.
That's cool.
On Special Forces stuff, on training Special Forces teams that were coming through JRTC, and we'd be in the same briefings. I'd provide my coaching, but I'd also be able to sit there and be like, hey, Mr. Tuttle, the contractor who helps with the planning of this event, what's your expertise and your advice? How did you guys approach this during the Cold War and 10th Special Forces Group or the Berlin Detachment? How did you guys look at this problem set? And so I just got to actually work in a professional setting with a family member that I look up to, and I thought that was incredibly cool.
Oh, yeah, it's awesome.
Not only that, but jumping out of airplanes, anything you can possibly imagine, shooting all sorts of cool weapons. Buddies got to augment Secret Service when the president came over, having the humbling opportunity to bring back any of our fallen brothers who killed in combat, getting to escort them back to. That's one of those things that will forever kind of swell in my heart, getting the chance to do. I had the privilege of assisting in that realm as well.
Hell yeah, it's badass. I like it.
All right, so on today's episode, we've talked teammates, we've talked mindset of going from being a leader to a team. Other thing I wanted to ask too, I asked this question when we do our leading leaders panel, and we like to ask this with our civilian executives we host here. But there's that cycle, right, of being a teammate first. You're always a teammate first. You start at the ground level. Then you earn the ability to lead that smaller team. So
Privilege, really.
Yeah,
right?
Privilege, total privilege.
I'd say even being in the Army is a privilege. People don't see that, but it is.
You volunteered for it.
Yeah, you get great pay, you get health insurance, you get to do cool stuff.
You get really cool stuff, especially in Army Special Operations. Little plug there. But so you're in this constant cycle of going from, I would say, kind of doer to leader, doer to leader, doer to leader. How do you, as a non-commissioned officer, approach going from being the doer to the leader? What's that like for you?
I'd say that it's a cycle for both. I think you're always a doer and a leader no matter what position you're in. You can be, just because you're not in a leadership position doesn't mean you're not a leader, right? But you always, in this position here, this person's in charge. How do I support that person? And then how do I support the people on my left and right, and not just get pigeonholed into, I'm a weapons sergeant, so I'm going to just do his weapons sergeant stuff. No, how do I open my aperture and realize that I need to cover down on these things, I need to help the person in charge doing these things, and then I also need to mentor this person behind me, right? So I think that as you're going through that flux, you're trying to figure out maybe now I'm in this leadership position, and then you have to transition your mindset too, because then now, again, you don't have to like the people you work with. You don't have to love them.
It was good when you do.
It is good, but you have to care about them, right?
Absolutely.
And maybe you're handed a mission that you don't really agree with, that you think the rules are stupid. It doesn't matter. You should take pride and care about doing that well in the organization, right? So I think I was like, now I'm doing, but now I'm in this next position to where I have to step outside of my ego a little bit and realize that I'm not just taking care of these people here and myself, I'm also now taking care of the organization, right? The definition of leadership has that specific component, how to improve in the organization. So I just think you always got to take a step back. If you can check your humility, which we all have a problem with, right? We all have egos, and egos aren't necessarily a bad thing. It's just your sense of self. But if we can always check that and realize that you do need to be selfish, right? Because you have to take care of yourself. And you have to balance it with being selfless. You can't just always be selfless, because then you're going to suffer. So how do you balance it out? I think that as you look through that cycle, and here's a plug, next week we got Mike Larerio, who's already on the podcast, coming in to do an LPD, leadership and balance. That's what he talks about, is how do you act as that fulcrum at all times across all of his domains that he teaches and apply that to where you're going. So now I'm in this role as a doer, and even as a doer, I'm a leader, because that's just, you should do that. And then now I'm in this next role. How do I balance it out, change my mindset so in this next role I can understand that? And as you move up too, like we said, you're going to be a hypocrite. Now your job is to mature and ensure that you're looking out not just for the people under you, but the organization as a whole. And sometimes you're not going to be able to balance it out completely either. I think that's hard for people. They like to continue to be bros, and that doesn't always work out all the time, right? And we all make those mistakes, but as we learn from them,
I think just adding on to that, I think preparing your family too as you transition from being a doer to like the leader on the team of the detachment. Like you're gonna have greater responsibility,
be stressed out more, a
little bit more stressed out. But one of our mentors, one of the guys we've had here recently, a phenomenal individual, Marshall Carlson from Hendricks Motorsports, winningest NASCAR team out there in America, which is pretty awesome. Chuck and I just spent a little bit of time with them on their campus just the other day. But what Marshall likes to say is he very much went from being a sniper as a doer, focusing on one precision type aspect of the team that he was the expert on. Now he's got to work with a shotgun. Yeah. He can't spend all of his time and energy on one thing. He has to look at the bigger picture.
Now he has to manage multiple things, right? You lead people, but you manage things.
There you go.
Like you manage your time, resources, stuff like that, right? And as a doer, you can just not really worry about managing a whole lot except for yourself.
Yeah. Or your specific section or whatever that might be, your staff.
But then when you move up, like you get change management, time management, resource management. It's you manage things, you lead people.
There you go.
Boom. But just to recap, again, we started off talking about my method acting just because I like to take shots at officers whenever I can.
LARPing, actually.
LARPing, yes. And
he does have a shield and a sword with him.
I do have a pretty sweet Star Wars shirt on, so that's pretty cool. But I wasn't acting like I was in Star Wars. Anyway, but the importance of going to those, PMEs, as we talked about, is you're not going to learn things that they're that sexy or probably enjoyable. And you don't have to like them. Like we talked about leadership. You don't have to like the material. I've never liked the material I'm learning in PM. I've never been like, oh man, I'm really excited about writing this white paper on mission command or whatever we're doing, right? But I've always found as I'm studying these things and looking into them, I start getting interested, and I'm like, oh man, that's really cool, and I can apply that here. And then
because you're also a lifelong learner though too.
Yeah,
and that's
I do want to cover that, like that continuing education piece. Again, it's not just civilian education, but it's also not just your military education. But you always need to bust out your manuals and research things that have changed. Because, I'll give you an example. If you have a major in Special Forces and they're like, well, I don't agree with, why are we doing this at this ex-eval, X, Y, and Z? It's like, well, walk me through. It's like, well, I think these things are dumb. These don't apply to real life. You would never have to do this in real life. Like, hold on. Let me open up Field Manual 3-18, which is the Army's manual on what a Special Forces team and company and a battalion is supposed to be able to do. So, like, the Army expects you to deploy as a company and command and control 1 to 6 ODAs in an austere environment and be able to set up in a tactical environment first with trucks and operate with an effect cell with a lot of enablers to do these things. This is what the Army expects you to do. Like, it doesn't matter if you think that's dumb. Like, that's what the Army expects you to do. So that's what we got to go and we got to be good at. But if people just open up that manual and understand, like, oh, okay, regardless of what my opinion is, the Army expects me to be able to do this first, so I should probably be able to do this. And I can go do the things that I prefer to do after I've done what's necessary.
After you've proven yourself to be able to master that.
But all that to say is the continuing education is know what you're talking about. Like we talked about it in the Forged and Fire podcast. It's never cool to be ignorant. I've never sat in front of somebody, realized they had no clue what they're talking about, and said, you know what, man, I really appreciate that you don't know what you're talking about and wasting my time. That's really cool. Thank you. No, you need to know what you're talking about. And again, you don't have to be slave to those rules all the time, but you should be educated on what the rules are. Anyway, that's my little diatribe.
Love it. So again, no guests today, just
we're guests.
Me and Chuck sitting down talking about some relevant topics, reflecting from the previous, really the last 6 months of us recording, I think 11 podcasts that have aired thus far for Pineland Underground. But lots of exciting new guests, lots of exciting content.
And we've taken our listenership up about 800% at this point from where we started. So I think that's pretty badass.
Yeah, as we're sitting here, I think we're over 24,000.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I mean, so we talked about the success of the podcast to date, how we increased our listenership, but I think we need to do a special shout out to the guys that actually make this thing happen, right? Jason and Tommy, who take all of our screw ups and they edit them out the best we can. We had the incident with the Kyle Lamb podcast, which I enjoyed, but also there was some audio errors in there because my mic had shut off in the podcast at the beginning and we didn't notice it, and he was able to fix that to where we could still use most of the podcast. It just sounded a bit off, but that level of skill has been awesome, and I think that this podcast wouldn't be anything without them. So shout out to Tommy and Jason.
Tommy Stanley, Jason Gambardella, like awesome individuals to work with, extreme experts in the way they approach guiding us through the technicalities, the editing, really setting things up, making sure the messaging is clear, making sure that everything comes clear, and then also giving us their expert advice on topics or ways to approach it. Tommy and Stanley, Tommy and Jason, you guys have been rocking it. Chuck and I are excited to be part of the team to work with you guys.
Yeah, and you're going to edit that right there because that was wild.
We're going to attain new heights. The John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Center and School has given us a lot of great resources and ability to expand the command's message.
And the latitude to do whatever we want. So you're going to hear the outro at the end with our email address. If you want to hear a topic, email us. Let us know what it is. We can do pretty much whatever we want to at this point. We said up front that it's one of our, or at least my goal, to try to get Major Tuttle fired every time the CG listens to this podcast. That hasn't happened yet, so maybe we're not pushing the envelope enough.
But it is real. It is bold. It is unrestricted.
And it is the best podcast in the military. Prove me wrong.
Bobby Tuttle, Chuck Ritter, signing off.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us today in Pineland Underground, the U.S. Army John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Center and School's official podcast.
Please tune in to our next episode. We release episodes every 2 weeks.
You can reach us at pinelandunderground@gmail.com. Check it out.